Self-explanatory.
We try to be self-explanatory here at the advisory board.
That's a nice little system, actually. It's a little better than what we're used to with the hand. So with that, the minutes are approved. At this time, we're fortunate to have the general manager of the MBTA join us this morning, Philip Ang. And I want to say a couple of things about Philip's leadership. I think he's the right guy at the right time. There's an old saying, the times make the man a woman, or the man and woman make the times. I think there's probably a combination of both here, Phil. It's great to have a true railroad guy at the helm with all the challenges we have. With that, you've shown great respect to the advisory board, and I'm grateful for that, because that wasn't always the case. And I know you've instructed your staff to do the same, and we've had a good working relationship between your staff and Brian. And I also, as a board member representing the advisory board, I appreciate your updates, your constant communication, and your leadership. So with that, we'd like to ask the general manager to chat with us a bit, give us some words of wisdom, hopefully, Philip, and then we'll take some questions if you have some time.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Brian, and thank you to the whole advisory board. It has been a whirlwind year, and today marks the, I guess, day 365 of my first year. So what a coincidence to have an advisory board meeting that falls right on the end of my first year. And you know, it has been a tremendous amount of change in 1 year, and at the same time, there is so much more that I know we can continue to improve and deliver differently. So what I'd like to focus on, we could go through some of the key highlights and some of the things that, you know, very publicly are out there. But I think a lot of this is about the culture shift of the MBTA, the workforce, and the management team on how we are looking to do things differently. And as we go into this budget process and look at the needs of all the agencies, not just MBTA, I know how it's important to really demonstrate that agencies like myself can deliver, and that when we're entrusted with public dollars, that we find ways to use it wisely and make meaningful impacts. And it really has been a testament, I think, to the strong will of the agency, the workforce, to get us to this point. You know, so as I dive into the different key areas, I always go back to what the workforce is doing. And if I remember way back in March when I was announced, it was about putting people in positions to succeed. It was about tackling problems and solving them, and finding ways to avoid those roadblocks that hindered progress, that hindered success, and just finding solutions, because that's really what we're about. We're here to support day-to-day life of everybody, individually and across the state. And at the same time, we're here to really set this place where we can be successful long-term and not just short-term. So that's a lot of competing needs, a lot of balances. And then all the things that I don't say right now, but we know safety has to be paramount in everything we do. But at the same time, we have to find ways to do things more efficiently. So think about it, the year where we've hired tremendous amount of folks, a lot of operators to start rebuilding our ability to run better service, a lot of field personnel to improve how we can maintain the system, fix the system, in parallel with using the private sector industry. You know, but it is balance. It is a balance of us having enough in-house capabilities, which is really important, I believe, to be able to manage the private sector when we use them. And it goes hand in hand. The track work that we've been doing is on pace. The amount of diversions that we've had in this first quarter of this year have been record-setting, and we have been able to maintain our diversion schedule because we've changed the way we plan the work, the way we scope the work, and the way we are getting ourselves set up to go into each of these different outages and do the work. The team briefed me on this maybe a week and a half ago. I think we've had 30 diversions to date, and just off the top of my head, and we've been able to hit the mark on all of them. And I think that is going to be important not only for us accomplishing work, but when we put contractors out to bid, and contractors need those outages to be reliable when they plan on them, that will reduce costs, that will increase competition. And we're seeing that actually on our track improvement program. The contracts we put out to bid, we've seen more competition than we anticipated a year ago, and we're seeing really good pricing in terms of pricing that actually is consistent with our engineer's estimate. In some cases below the engineer's estimate, because the industry is seeing that it's a much more engaged owner, an owner that is making field decisions, timely decisions, and allowing them to get in and do the work they need to. And then when we're done, delivering the results that we've promised to the public. And each of those restrictions, each of those diversions, we've learned from them, whereby how we can improve further down the road. Hopefully at the end of this year, we'll have a lot of lessons learned in terms of how to keep planning for the future, larger capital work, because a lot of focus has been on safety, state of good repair, fixing track restrictions, fixing power issues that have long been left alone as well. But we're seeing the work of the track program demonstrate that we can. We now have embarked on the blue line, which is important. We have two big diversions coming up, whereby we will finish all the blue line work in advance of the pending Sumner Tunnel work again. And in this case, it's going to be in a manner where we're using these diversions, whereas last year we got a lot of work done in the overnight and on weekends, but this gives us the ability to go in and do more state of good repair on top of speed restrictions. So you'll see a different kind of result. You'll see one that lasts longer, and when speed restrictions do come back, we can get back in and take care of them more quickly. And I think that's been demonstrated where we had, if I recall correctly, a speed restriction come back on Mattapan, but we were able to get back in quickly. We actually have one, I think, on Riverside on the Green Line, and we'll be taking care of that on Thursday. Again, to be able to keep our system as restriction-free as possible, that will be the new norm, and that's the new expectation that our folks have, which is why it's important to rebuild our internal capacity, our maintenance folks, our track workers, our power electricians, and our station folks. That is something that is day in and day out, just really standard operating maintenance, basic maintenance, corrective repairs. And we're excited about the new hires because they are the basis for us to be able to train them the way we want to, have them skilled, and they will be the future leaders of this agency. I firmly believe that, the future is very bright with the enthusiasm I'm seeing from the new hires. Safety department, we've continued to build that team back up under the leadership of Chief Safety Officer Tim Lesniak. A lot of critical vacancies we are still working on filling, but he has been able to really dive into it and start addressing a lot of the corrective action plans from DPU, strong partnership and relationship and open transparency with DPU on things that we're finding, things that they find, and regular leadership meetings that we go back and forth to discuss how best to address them. At the end of the day, they have a role for oversight, and we have a role for operations and doing all the things that we're responsible for. And that open dialogue has been really instrumental in terms of being successful. The QCO group is also continuing to move down the path of working with FTA, addressing all the issues that have come out of that FTA SMI, and continuing to rebuild an organization that will be long-lasting as well. All of these areas keep us honest, keep us focused, not just day to day, but how we can build a stronger team moving forward. A lot of things in the background that not everyone is seeing, but we're doing a lot of work in our yards, in our facilities, under Dennis Varley, and working with the new COO, Ryan Caholen. We really want to make sure we focus on our workforce and their environment, but even yards and facilities where we stage trains and we move trains and we maintain buses and equipment. We know that that's not public facing. It's not often as seen. And maybe that in the past, we've not invested as much as we should. So we really focus on our worker environment too. They need to have a place where they can be successful and they could manage all of the day-to-day maintenance of our fleet to be able to make sure that when they go out into service, it's exactly what the public expects and deserves. Commuter rail cars, or should I say the heavy rail cars, the red and orange line. I know publicly a lot of focus has been on getting orange line cars, red line cars. Pleased to say we have 114, if I remember correctly, orange line cars in our possession and 18 red line cars. And we're working really hard on making sure that the quality of those cars stay as high as they've been, and that the production not only stays consistent, but starts to improve. I know that CRC is committed to this contract. Their subs are very appreciative because a lot of the recent renegotiations covered a lot of inflation, cost escalation, and material supply issues that they were facing. And this allows them to be move forward in a much more, I guess, consistent manner where they know that they can stay above water and support this contract. Everybody's committed to getting all these fleet by the end of 2027. And with every new car we have, the old cars get retired. That actually allows our folks in the shops, our maintenance folks, the ability to focus on keeping new fleet in the shape they are and stop trying to rebuild some of these old type 1, type 2 red line cars that I think everyone on this call probably knows parts are non-existent. We're making them ourselves. And continue to invest in that just is self-defeating, I'll say. So I'm really excited about where we are going with red and orange line cars. I do want to take a look at how rolling stock is procured in the future, including bus vehicles. Recently, a few months ago, visiting the White House, FTA, they talked about bus electrification and the lack of manufacturers that now exist. A lot of manufacturers have found that with price escalation, inflation, and the way contracts were structured, particularly customization, a lot of them were choosing not to do business anymore. And what we are working with through Federal Transit Administration and the White House is all the agencies across the country, when we met, talked about eliminating customization. And I think that's just an example of buses, but we should start to eliminate customization in a lot of things we do, whether it's commuter rail, whether it's our stations. The customization sounds great initially, but then when you need to maintain something, when you need to fix things, it really becomes more problematic. So really a commitment to that. And that doesn't mean we can't have state-of-the-art equipment. We can't have state-of-the-art facilities. It just means that we're putting our operations side, our maintenance side, in a better position to succeed and to be able to stay on top of things. Excited about the hiring as it relates to bus service and how that allows us to not only get back to where we hope bus service was pre-pandemic, but to really take a look at how we can have bus service better serve all the communities. And that means taking a look at the routes, taking a look at dedicated bus lanes. I know there's been attention on bus lanes and the need for enforcement or adherence to the rules. That is something that I've seen other parts of the country where when those bus lanes are allowed to be used as intended, bus service goes up. The trips are more reliable, the schedules are adhered to, and the public benefits from it. And so do our employees. One of the things that when I've had a lot of site visits talking to the frontline employees is these schedules are tough to meet. And it's the same thing with the heavy and light rail. When the speed restrictions impact their schedules, takes longer to run. They don't get their breaks. So there's a lot of benefit, not only from a safety perspective and a public perspective, but from an employee perspective, which is really the crux of what we need to make sure is robust and strong. they're able to better adhere to schedules. They don't feel the pressure of trying to meet a timeline that when you have these types of blocks in the dedicated lanes or even regular traffic, it really puts a lot of burden on operators. And from my perspective, it's the management's responsibility to start tackling these things. So excited about that, excited about where buses can go because they carry 30 to 40% of our ridership. And they are, I think, like the feeder pools that really connect a lot of different services, particularly where we don't have rail to provide those services. And working with the RTAs and finding those partnerships is something that I'm excited about as well. Looking at rail, as we continue to look at commuter rail service, I'm proud of the service that we've run. Last month, again, the on-time performance was robust in the, I think around 93% on-time performance. And if I remember correctly, the update I got from Keolis, the ridership again exceeded 90% of pre-pandemic levels, which is really robust. The Newburyport Rockport line had the highest weekend ridership and the best performance way back in October. But it shows that when you start to provide more frequent service with schedules that people can adapt to, whether it's for work or events, people will use the system. And the testament is that our commuter rail system, and I think we move from commuter rail to more regional rail discussions in the future because it's not just about commuting. But the fact is we're leading the country in terms of return to ridership on commuter rail. And I think that's a testament to the effort that the T has taken with regards to improving service, more frequency. We still have work to do. We're working on, how do we get enough equipment? How do we get enough employees? And I know Keolis is working with regards to, addressing a lot of the labor concerns there. That's, their responsibility. We're keeping a close eye on it. And I'm confident that those discussions will end up fruitful as well. What else should I touch on? Accessibility. As you travel the system and you watch people use it, you really can sense the importance of not only a reliable service, clean system, but the need to really start looking at how we can take a system as old as ours and start bringing in and modernizing it as well. And I think that's part of the excitement of the challenge that we have, not only fixing it and keeping it running, but building for the future. And that's, I think that goes hand in hand with when we're renovating stations, when we're replacing stations, or even just upgrading. How do we make sure we tackle those things that make it equitable, accessible, and convenient for everybody that needs to use it? And, that is a commitment that I had in my prior roles and a commitment that I'm working here with Laura Brailsford and the team to make sure as we program priorities that we're not losing sight of the importance of that. And some big stuff coming up. The Symphony Station that we've been talking with industry is hopefully going to be out for procurement shortly. That was a successful ASAP grant, and that station will improve accessibility, but also improve the environment for a lot of people using that station. We're excited about that project coming up. And then talked about a little bit about being able to provide service for everyone. Very excited about the board's support for low-income fares and the governor's initiative from very start of last year with the legislature, the $5 million, giving us the ability to put this program in place and develop something that the board unanimously supported is really exciting. And really, I think going to benefit a lot of people that have wanted to use the system and couldn't afford to, and a lot of folks that are using the system currently, but have to balance the dollars that it costs them to ride versus other needs, such as putting food on the table and taking care of their families. 50% discount, not only on certain modes, we went for it all with every mode, and that is really exciting because we know that it's not just one sector. There's there's folks that could benefit from this across the Commonwealth, and having it available on every mode, commuter rail, the ride, the buses, the ferries, this light and heavy rail, really exciting, and excited about where that takes us going forward. Not only will it allow people who need to ride and using it, but I do believe it will increase ridership over time. And then longer term, how do we keep building, making our system more sustainable? How do we continue to make it more climate friendly? And while I'm focused on decarbonizing our own footprint, the effort that we've done this past year of making our system more reliable and continuing to stay on that piece, I think will also reduce the carbon footprint of other folks who maybe currently opt to use their own vehicles, get them out of the cars, get them using the system. I really believe that as they start to see how the system can run better with more on time on performance, cleanliness, and the gradual change that we're making, they will come back and they will opt to use the system. But the key is that they have choices, and that's the great thing about a very robust transportation network. It's not just one system, one mode. It's all these modes going in parallel, hand in hand. And my career has spanned highways, bridges, mass transportation, and multimodal communities, and all of that has to work together. No one system is going to solve it for everyone. So that's why communication is vital. These types of scenarios where we can talk openly about the needs and the direction is important. So I think with that, I don't know if we want to just jump into some Q&A, but I could probably talk forever if you let me. But I am really excited and thankful for the administration for being part of this team. I'm thankful for the MBTA Advisory Board for, as I think Mayor and Brian, you talked about, the open dialogue that we can have. And that's how we can be successful going forward. Just talking about the challenges. As one last thing, as we continue to move forward, we're always going to uncover things that needed improvement in the past. But the commitment I have is that when we uncover them, we will make changes and we will look to deliver on our commitments going forward. So just thank you again for the support. Thank you for your commitment as well. And even the patience, because as much as we all want this to be overnight, we know some of this takes a little longer than we had hoped. But as long as it's forward progress, I'm really excited about the future.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. At this time, we'll open up. I just want to remind everyone, we've got limited time with the General Manager. If we could keep our questions concise, that'd be tremendous. So I see Bruce from Harvard, you got your hand up? You're
Bruce,
on mute.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you so much. This is really helpful to get an update. Let me be real quick. One of the rate limiting factors on the Fitchburg line is that because of the success in bringing back ridership, we're almost out of parking again. So if you look at Acton and Littleton, you're not going to be able to take the train and fill the trains if we don't have places for people to park, or they can't reliably find a place to park. Can that be built into the nearer term plans?
Yes, it's a very good point you bring up in terms of when ridership gets back to where we want it to be, and even beyond that, the challenges that we had before come back. And that's a good challenge. I don't mind that challenge. We definitely have to look at how people can get to the stations, last mile, first mile. And while parking is great, I think there's ways to really balance more parking, but the real goal is to get people out of their cars. So I think we have to get creative. Some of the things that I was working on at Long Island Railroad as well is even real-time parking information, where garages have number of spots available. Because I think sometimes the frustrating part is you get to a station and there's no more spots available. So, not done looking at how parking can be, but I think there's other things. And even as we have more frequent service, things that I know some of my role in the past was grade crossings and gates. The more frequent the trains run, the more time the gates are down. So that's something that I have to look at long-term as well. How do we mitigate that component? Because what we don't want to do is now to have local streets that are waiting for gates to go up and down to be sitting with idling cars as well. So it really is improving service, but then we have to find ways to mitigate the things that come out of success. But you're 100% right, David.
Okay, we'll go
So
to
we
Matt.
will look.
Thank you, Mayor Koch, General Manager Heng. Just want to say thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your leadership at the MBTA. One topic you hit on was around bus lanes and bus lane enforcement. I think on the city side, we're eager to work with the MBTA around this. Do you have any specific ideas or thoughts on bus lanes or bus enforcement?
Well, I think it's twofold. I know there's a lot of discussion about enforcement and technology, and I know that works in other parts, in other agencies. So I think that is definitely a discussion that needs to be done, whether it's camera technology or things of that nature. The other part is really education as well. And I know a lot of folks don't realize the impacts they have. It just seems very simple. I'll just park here for a quick minute. I'm running into a store and pick up a cup of coffee or whatever. But that really has a ripple effect, because now that bus has to make a maneuver that it shouldn't have to make, and going into traffic that's not expecting the bus to go around a parked vehicle. So those are areas where it's education, it's enforcement at some point. But I know the team works very closely with the different municipalities, and there's a lot of spirit of cooperation. So, we have to really dive into the best way. I don't want to say there's only one solution, but really what it is that those communities where buses are allowed to operate successfully, I think that even the businesses and the people that live along those corridors will see that there's tremendous benefit to them, because that actually attracts more people to those areas when traffic is flowing and people are able to get out and about. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. And I think there's a lot of opportunity as I actually engage with more of the transit CEOs across the country to see how they've tackled this. But certainly education and enforcement are some of the areas that have been successful so far.
Thank you, Phil. Can we go to Christine from Haverhill?
Good morning. With me today is Mayor Melinda Barrett, and she had a question for Chairperson Eng. Hello, Chairperson. We were notified last week, rather surprisingly, since originally the rebuild of a railroad overpass on the Bradford side of our line was supposed, when it was initially discussed, it was a one weekend kind of disruption. They would build adjacent to the bridge and then lay it down on one weekend. A week ago, we were notified, or actually 2 weeks ago, we were notified from our representative that goes to these meetings that the Haverhill station was going to be closed for an entire year with no transportation from the Bradford side to the Haverhill side. When I spoke to your representative, they said it's pretty close. People can walk. To say that is ridiculous is the mildest thing I can say. Totally unacceptable. There has to be a workaround for this. Originally, it was proposed for a weekend, and now it's a year. And we lose our hub station in an area where people don't necessarily even have transportation to drive over to the other side. We have businesses that people use that to get to the center of town. I just find it, there has to be a workaround.
Right. And thank you for bringing this up, Mayor. A couple of things. I believe if it hasn't been communicated, the team has worked out shuttle bus service between Haverhill and so if that hasn't been communicated, I hope that
It has not.
Okay, well, there is going to be bus service between those two stations. The other thing that I've seen in project delivery in the past is during the early planning phases of projects, there is community outreach, but that's several years usually before we get to construction. And I think what happens is by the time it gets to construction, there needs to be another robust outreach as well. I know there were briefings, I'm told, but maybe not robust enough. And what I've committed to is that we are going to have, in advance of construction, this dialogue too. So these kinds of things are not left after the decisions are made, that they can be discussed in advance. And then lastly, when this was raised to my attention, myself, my new head of capital, and the new head of the operations side of the T is taking a look at how we construct and how we can do things creatively and differently. This one is awarded 100% designed, but I know that there's been experiences where I think we can find better ways to mitigate outages, have less outages. I haven't had a chance to dive into this enough, but that doesn't mean we can't sit down with the contractor and see if there's future mitigations that can even further. But there is definitely going to be bus service between the two stations. And I appreciate you bringing this up.
Well, I would appreciate you exploring the original proposal that we were led to believe was going to be the case, that construction was going to be adjacent to the, in a lot adjacent to the bridge, and then only have, a weekend of disruption and everything go as planned, as far as our stops.
So my understanding is the new bridge structure is going to be built off or adjacent, and that will be rolled in a weekend. My understanding, just again, in the short time I've had to look at this over the last week, is that a lot of the work over that period of time is due to the substructure work that supports the new bridge. But again, I'm challenging the team to take a look at, can we minimize the impacts to service? Because from my perspective, the less busting, the better. If people can ride the trains, the better. So we're not done taking a deep dive into that project, Mayor.
I appreciate it. We do have a bridge construction on the Basilia Bridge, which is our main thoroughfare over the Merrimack River from connecting the Bradford section of Haverhill to Haverhill proper. And that is going to commence next year also. So we want less people on the roads, not more. And I think the train stopping in Haverhill is a critical piece of that. Thank
Mr.
you.
General Manager, maybe you could follow up with your team, with the mayor and her team in the coming days, so we can get to a few more folks that have questions. I know your time is valuable. Is that, if that is okay with you, Mayor and
Sure.
General
Yeah,
Manager?
thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mayor.
We go to Susan.
Hi, well, thank you so much for your 365 days of service. It's been great to see some of the changes. In regards to the success of having recruited more bus drivers and other staff, particularly with bus drivers, can you offer any sort of timeline when communities that have lost bus service might see a restoration of that service? And then a related question on staffing. I saw in the House preview of their budget today some funds set aside for an MBTA Academy. And if that's anything you could speak to, I was just curious how that may change things. Thanks.
So I know we just graduated a very large class of bus operators. I don't recall the exact number. But part of the process has been not only the huge hiring effort, but then onboarding and then the whole training process. I'll have to get back to you with the exact timeline on when, because I still know that we need to hire more folks. Part of our process going forward in this year is to hire even above and beyond, because the discussions on a better bus network redesign includes bringing in more operators. So it's going to be a continuous work in progress going forward in terms of hiring the right number of people, and actually then continuing to hire, because attrition does still happen, whether it's retirements or for other reasons. But I will get back to you on this. And let me just make sure I got it. with regard to the, what I'm hearing, and I don't have all the information on the potential proposed budget. The one thing I will say is just looking at the line item there. This is consistent with what I've been trying to do and working with our labor partners. Not only are we looking to rebuild our workforce, we want to make sure that we have them set up and train them properly from day one. And I think that's one of the things that is key to not only them enjoying their job, but wanting to stay on long term. The folks that I've seen coming through these classes at the hiring orientation meetings, they're very enthusiastic about being here. And part of this would be to make sure that they have the right training, they have the right equipment, and that they know we are focused on them, because without our workforce, it doesn't matter what I say that we're going to try to do. We can't do it without them. I think this is just about building that safety culture, building the best practices on how we go about doing things. And it's not just bus operators, it could be track laborers, it could be, at least that's the way I envision. So it's really an investment in the future. It's an investment in our workforce, which everybody knew last year, and the governor set a goal for us because she knew without the workforce, we can't fulfill our commitments. We exceeded that goal, but that means we can't let up on what we've just done, because then all of last year would be for not as fruitful, let me just say, if we don't train and bring the workforce along properly.
Bill, we got a couple more hands up. You still got a little time?
Sure.
Okay, Dan?
Thank you very much, and thank you for your service, sir. One of the main concerns I have is safety issues. We've had some incidents in my town of Whitman. And I've noticed, like, when a train pulls into the station, the gates are down, but the train is stopped and letting people on or letting people off. The gates are down, and I've seen people get impatient and walk around the gates or use a bicycle and drive around the gates. And I'm wondering, with the new MBTA Community Overlay District being established in most of our towns, so I know we have in our town, at least my Board of Selectmen we have voted it on a yes, and now it's going to the zoning board. But I'm afraid that there's going to be more walking traffic to the T stations, and I'm worried about safety. And I'm wondering what the procedure is if a train pulls into the station and it's stopped there for 10 minutes and the gates stay down for 10 minutes. People get impatient and they walk around. I've seen a woman push her carriage around them. And I laid into her when the gates open. I said, "What are you doing?"
All right, want to give him a shot at answering it, Dan?
Yeah.
So Dan, let me dive into that particular issue. Which station are you talking about, first of all?
I'm in town of Whitman.
Okay. I know at Long Island Railroad, when we had trains in the stations, it requires extra resources. But if you know there's no other trains coming and it's already past the grade crossing, you can have crews key it so the gates can go up.
Okay.
Let me look at those specific things. Now that again is resources and people, but certainly I understand if a train is sitting idle, people don't want to wait 10 minutes. We do have to, though, with the education piece, grade crossing safety is something
Yes.
that really is so important, because you may think that train's not moving. If you're in double track territory, there could be a train coming from a
The
different
opposite way. Absolutely.
and
Yes.
that's where one of the things I did last year, and this is more vehicular traffic, but I think pedestrians would also see it, is the line stripings, the line markings, and the delineators. And we're going to go in with cross hatching to just show these are areas that you should not be in when the gates are down. Because it's just, I think from the normal person sees a train, you might even think it's far away. You don't realize how fast they come on
I
you.
know.
So education is another key area, and having, not only with transit police, ourselves, local police, going into these different stations and teaching the communities, just the right way to cross our stations. And when the gates are down, they shouldn't, but let me look at what we can do with regards to when they're down too long. And then one
Thank
other
you,
thing
Phil.
that we've talked about internally is being able to go out to schools and do education, because I think we need to teach kids at the right ages about great crossing safety as well.
Could you please mute your screens, those that aren't speaking? We got Duncan, and then we'll wrap up with Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to follow up basically on Susan's question regarding bus service. I know when you came on board, the bus network redesign or better bus network was kind of a pretty well defined. And of course, COVID and the workforce issues have intervened. I was just curious if there is some kind of high level update you could give us in terms of, is the redesign still the long-term way forward? It has something like a 25% increase in revenue service hours. Is that still in the cards? Can we find out something about that?
Yeah, that is still the vision. That doesn't mean that program doesn't get continuously reviewed and updated. And I think the other piece, to allude to, what I need to make sure is that we have robust communication as well, because sometimes it's been talked about, some period ago. I think it's important to come back and make sure everyone is still on the same page, understands what we're doing. And I also know that anytime you alter a bus route, and while it may improve the route for everybody, it has local impacts, it has individual impacts. So I think there needs to be a robust communication. That doesn't mean it's not a good thing. It doesn't mean we don't do something, but I think we need to make sure that the lines of communication are there, because I know how it is. This is my trip. This is the way I do it. And it's very hard to make changes, despite that they may improve for the greater good and get more people out of cars and allow people to get out and about better. But that is still the direction that we're looking to go right now.
Okay, thank you.
Brian.
Thank you, sir. GM, thank you. Two questions. One is from the chat. Kevin Calcutt from Norfolk wanted to ask, while ridership may be showing upside, frequency concerns are still top of mind for riders on the Franklin commuter rail line, especially with the inclusion of the Foxborough station. As these communities begin to outline MBTA zoning planning, are there plans to solidify the split route of these two end branches of the Franklin line? I think he's asking about Foxborough service permanency.
Well, I think these are always the challenges as we look to increase service and we look to increase more communities. How do we continue to build up our services that we can provide what everyone is expecting in those different locations? I would say it's probably better for me to pull my team together and we could sit down and talk about this. But long term, it really is about getting the operators, getting the equipment, and then having the ability along each corridor to be able to stage the trains where we can provide the level of service that people want. And again, it's not just rehabilitating and replacing what we have. It's, do we have the yard space? Do we have the facilities to maintain it? And do we have the right workforce to provide levels of service? So that's a good discussion that I think I could convene with my head of railroad ops and we could sit down.
And sir, if I might ask a question for myself. So GM, as we begin our work looking over the capital budget and the operating budget, can you just give us a little highlight, sort of preview about what we can expect to see, and then how cities and towns can be most helpful to you as you move into year 2 at the T?
Well, what we've been doing over the period of looking at our needs and our investments is taking a really deep dive into the capital investment plan, not only to look at the projects that we want to fund moving forward, but I've asked the team, and we really spent a lot of time going over the projects that were currently in process. Because one of the things that I am looking to do is to make sure that projects that are late, we find ways to correct them and get them back on schedule. Projects that are planning and moving forward, is that we set the right tone going forward, that on time, on budget is going to be important. But also, how do we fund each of the projects, and how do we hold ourselves accountable to those schedules is going to be something I think that as we talk more and more about each project, some that are ongoing and some that are coming up, people can see that we're looking to say, we need to better deliver. We need to deliver these projects when we say we will. And that means when we put them out to bid and we have contract awards, we also have the ability to support the projects that we are putting out. I'm seeing projects where we have not been able to give sufficient access for things to be done. You know, that affects costs, that affects schedules. You know, so when we put a project out moving forward, one of the things I'm working with is what outages does a project need to be supported? And then we have to commit to those outages. What we're working on, not only the track program, is to have the 365 days a year, what work needs to be done, when do we expect it to be done, and how do we commit to those? And I think that goes back to, I talked about 30 diversions to date. We're planning better, we're scheduling better, and we need to hold ourselves to that commitment on, you want this weekend for a diversion, you better be ready, whether you're an outside party or our own maintenance crews. And then this way, again, we will see projects start to be delivered more on time, on budget, and we'll see more competition, I believe, because when you're bidding a project, you have less risk if they know the agency, the owner, is going to commit to this effort. I've talked about this publicly when I was at Long Island Railroad. The third track project, 10-mile along the main line corridor of the Long Island Railroad's key branch. 250 trains a day went through that corridor. $2.6 billion design build project, and 92% of those outages over the 4 years were given as promised. And the 8% that were changed was because of COVID or because of the contractor request. With that project, 2.6 billion, was delivered under budget and on time. And that's what we need to do moving forward. We really need to be, as an owner, committed to, if this project's important, let's make sure we are putting everyone in a position to succeed, at the same time holding ourselves accountable. So I think what you'll see is that the dollars that we have, we're going to really take a close look and make sure that we're using them to make improvement today, and make sure that we're setting ourselves up to better deliver projects going forward. So long answer, and probably a lot more detail that needs more time than we have. And the only other thing I wanted to say is, because as we were talking about the 1 year and 365 days, I just realized that we had a leap year day in there, so I might be on day 366. But anyway, thank you so much, Brian, and thank you to everybody.
Want to thank the general manager for coming and appearing and taking the questions. And folks, keep in mind that when you have questions about any issue, Brian can help facilitate those through the staff of the general manager's office. We don't have to wait for a meeting with the GM. They've been very responsive. And I know the big elephant in the room, and I don't want to talk about it today, but we all know, is the whole revenue challenge coming up. And Brian is serving on that task force on behalf of the advisory board. And that's, I think, a time when we come up with a plan with the legislature that we're going to need every community to step in and be supportive of ultimately that program that's going to put us on a more stable revenue program going forward, so we can meet the demands of the ridership. So again, thanks very much, General Manager. I'll see you soon.
Well, thank you, everybody. Beautiful spring weather. Let's enjoy it, and let's keep the momentum going. And again, thank you for the support, and don't hesitate to reach out. Don't wait for one of these meetings if there's something that you need to contact me for. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Brian, you have a report?
Yes, sir. I'll be very brief. I did provide this electronically. So the next meeting of the advisory board is May 14th, and the one after that is June 11th. This is where we get into our work doing oversight of the capital and operating budgets. So there will be a flurry of activities in May and June as the MBTA moves forward with its plans. The fiscal 29 capital budget, which you just heard from the GM, is going to be a little different. So we're going to have to work through that. And I'm very grateful to Suzanne Rasmussen from Cambridge, who chairs our CIP committee, for her flexibility. We'd hoped to begin our work already, but the T sort of delayed it so that the GM could really go through it with a finer tooth comb. So we're happy to work with him and the authority on that. And then in June, in May, we'll also begin the work on the operating budget. I've been working with the T to sort of nail down their schedule. They're still in flux a little bit. Fiscal 25 looks balanced, is the good news. So we have a little bit of time before sort of the FY 26 massive deficits come into play, assuming things go according to plan. So look out for a flurry of stuff from me as we sort of begin May. The Commuter Rail Committee had a great meeting on the 14th of March with the Executive Director of Commuter Rail, Mike Muller, and the CEO of Keolis, Abdullah Chowbi. They talked about the schedule changes that went into effect on April 7th. They've committed to coming to the advisory board and its committees to talk about schedule changes in the future in advance. And we're working with the folks in operation service planning to do that as well for bus and subway. And this is how we can get a little bit more proactive as they're doing these schedule plans to make sure that your communities are getting the information they need and are being heard before schedules get changed. The mayor mentioned the Transportation Funding Task Force. As folks know, I represent us on that body. We've met 3 times. The last meeting last week. Work continues at a furious pace. There's a lot to do. This is not just an MBTA funding committee. We're looking holistically at all of our infrastructure and transportation statewide. There are needs massively everywhere. And I want to just make a note that I have been pretty adamant that this task force also needs to include local Chapter 90 funding for communities. The current sort of model isn't working for most places, and the mayor of Gardner, who's not a member of the advisory board but is with us, Mayor Nicholson, is very supportive of that as well. So we're going to try to include that to make sure that communities have the money that they need to do the local projects that they have to do, because at the end of the day, your citizens really look to you first for local roads and bridges and the local roads and bridges that the T buses run on, as well as the way to get to stations. So look out for some more stuff from me. I'm going to be away starting Friday through next week. I'm going to be out of the country. If there are any MBTA Advisory Board emergencies, which I can't imagine there would be, my phone will work. Call me, but I might be the time difference might be the case. So I'll do my best to get back to you. And I'm also taking the afternoon off. I'm going to opening day with my dad. So if you need me, you got me for another hour. Other than that, Your Honor, thank you. And that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you, Brian. We're at the hour mark, so I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion, Dan from Whitman.
Second.
Second.
Okay, put up on the screen. Brian?
I think you can do that one without objection, I believe, sir.
Okay,
I didn't
all
put a
right.
poll together.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Enjoy the beautiful day, everybody. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Go
you,
Red
everybody.
Sox.